invite Alberto Magni to talk about the importance of reflection in learning ecosystems. As Alberto is having some trouble with the connection, I would ask kindly, very kindly, to my colleague José who to share his video. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alberto Magni, and I'm glad to present you the work we conducted with Alicia Calderón González and Ingrid Mulder,
You have sound?
researchers from the Participatory City Making Lab of the Technical University of Delft. This research work has been conducted within the broader EU research project, Designscapes. Our research started observing that a growing number of local initiatives are increasingly experimenting with urban innovation processes in response to societal challenges, especially pressing in cities. Implementing innovation at the urban level is however complex, and it requires an understanding and creation of valuable propositions for multiple stakeholders at different levels. An example is City Barge, an initiative that aims to make better use of inner city waterways of Delft, collecting and facilitating the separation of waste through modular system of electric pushboat, barge, and floating platforms. The adoption of such an innovation in the whole city of Delft, for example, requires the approval of citizens who are going to use it, but also of the municipality of Delft, of course, and the local waste management company. This means that innovators of City Barge not only have to be capable of designing a nice product, but they also need to learn how to best engage to the local communities of citizens to co-design the service with them, as well as understanding how to gain the endorsement of the municipality, or for example, convince the local waste management company to support the project. In sum, the successful implementation of this project is dependent on the ability to figure out which strategies and competencies they need to develop to deal successfully with all these actors. Our premise is therefore that innovators need to constantly learn from and with the urban ecosystem they operate in. In other words, they need to be able to utilize it as a learning ecosystem. For this, we envisage reflection as a core competence for urban innovators to better frame their needed learning journey to succeed in their projects. Why reflection? According to Hiller, reflection helps practitioners to improve their practice by using the information gained from experience. Even more relevant for innovation processes is Schoen's distinction of reflection in and on action, a process that he defines as a reflective conversation with the situations, where innovators name the things to which they will attend and frame the context in which they will attend them. This helps them relate the situation to past experiences that could help them approach it. Similarly, also Dorst and Krauss have described that designers undergo a similar reflective process in the exploration of so-called problem and solution spaces. This helps them frame new latent problems requiring new creative approaches. In particular, designers analyze a problem situation, relating them with elements of previous situations they have experienced, this to identify initial partial solutions that they know could be applicable to the problem at stake. This helps them isolate what are new, latent, and specific challenges from initial problems that they cannot yet solve. These unsolved challenges are also the ones that are likely to require new approaches or new capabilities. We argue that a similar reflective process can be helpful also for urban innovators' need of constantly learning throughout their project. However, while reflective approaches have been successfully used for professional self-development, it is not yet straightforward how urban innovators can benefit from these approaches when dealing with their complex, multifaceted challenges. We therefore set out the current study to investigate how reflection could more practically become a tool for innovators to identify the challenges ahead in their initiatives and the capabilities they need to acquire to achieve them. As mentioned earlier, the current work is part of the Horizon 2020 European Designscapes project. Designscapes entails a capacity building program supporting approximately 100 urban innovation initiatives from all around Europe. These initiatives are selected at their different stages of innovation: feasibility studies, prototyping when embedding solution in a urban context, and scaling when replicating to a new city. For this study, we invited the initiatives from the program that were currently developing and embedding their solutions in urban context. Out of a total of 30 initiatives, 7 participated in the study, for a total of 15 urban innovators taking part in their research activities. As innovators' reflections were not expected to be immediately noticeable, but rather internal mental processes, in order to make them tangible, we structured our study through a research approach entailing a series of 5 interventions where we used design artifacts to trigger innovators' reflections. These 5 interventions were also intended as 5 consecutive iterations, where each intervention informed the design on the following one to gradually develop a process for our reflective activities for innovators. As a setup, each intervention was designed as an online reflective session to help innovators reflect on their future steps in the projects, compare them with previous experiences in practice, and identify learning needs. In total, we designed 5 different sets of online templates to structure the reflective process that innovators would go through. Participants' interaction with the digital material developed allowed for observing their reactions and behaviors in the activity, collecting insights on the reflective process. Collaborative online tools such as Google Slides and Miro were utilized to structure the online sessions, while Skype or Zoom were used to communicate with participants. Finally, data was collected through audio, video recording, and note taking. Additionally, feedback interviews with participants were carried out at the end of each of the interventions. Through our research approach, we could distill a series of 5 steps forming a reflective process that seemed to be helpful in supporting innovators in identifying their learning needs. The first step in this process is for innovators to elaborate on a future task in their projects, detailing what they do, what they want to obtain, what they imagine this future task will involve, in order to uncover and highlight what will be required of them. Articulating these requirements of the task as a first step seemed in our interventions to ensure that the participants' reflection revolve around the relevant aspect that determine the success of the task. As a second step, participants were asked what they think they need to be good at to achieve the task at hand. We noticed how using such an open question rather than asking what competencies are necessary can encourage more nuanced and concrete actionable answers and not restrict participants to think only in terms of skills or competencies. Afterwards, it should helpful for participants to reflect on what they are already capable of doing. For example, recalling past experiences and analyzing what actions they took help them understand what resulted from them and in what circumstances they acted. This reflection mechanism helps first clarify the challenging aspects of a new task to consider, and lets participants reflect then on how these aspects force them to develop further capabilities, articulating once again what they need to be capable of or good at to succeed in their new task. These new required actions will likely point then to the new capabilities that innovators need to acquire and help them formulate the initial steps to continue their learning process. Next to defining this process, throughout our study, we also identified a series of aspects to consider when setting up and facilitating participants' reflection on learning needs. One of the first things that we noticed is that carry out our reflective process following the steps previously presented, especially with a team, the role of facilitator is key. All interventions required and benefited from some degree of facilitation, Also, in the last ones, where participants more autonomously carried out the activity, one of them naturally acted as facilitator and guided the group. As a second aspect, we understood that reflecting in a team can provide additional benefits compared to individual reflections. From our last three interventions that were carried out indeed as a group, we noticed more interesting reflections took place when participants shared their experiences with each other and built on each other's answers, ultimately co-constructing richer insights and defining more refined answers. As a third aspect, we identified the importance of finding a balance between openness and structure. During our intervention, it showed in fact instrumental for participants to find their flow and have room for discuss. When too many questions or instructions were given, as in iteration 2 and 3 for example, the activities ended up resulting scattered and stopping participants from seamlessly reflect in their process. Another important aspect is to guide urban innovators to contextualize the capabilities they may have exercised in the past and avoid discussing them as abstract qualities. As different circumstances change our ability to achieve the same task, being capable of doing something is in fact directly related to the specific context in which that something is carried out. As in Sean reflected conversation, here is valuable to guide participants to recall the elements of a situation that one has attended or will attend and frame that situation, reflecting on what circumstances make them capable or not of achieving something with the skills that they already possess, or otherwise, how this plays a role in stretching their current skills. To unveil these circumstances, we took inspiration from the reflective cycle of Gibbs that proved helpful, guiding participants in describing, evaluating anecdotes or episodes, keeping concrete the description of those situations. Overall, we also learned that capabilities are quite hard to express as such, and that expressing them more in terms of actions or requirements could be easier and even more useful for the purpose of the activity. In our last two interventions, we noticed how changing the question to what do you need to be good at helped participants to express their answers. Moreover, it was also noticed how descriptions as a new task could be instrumental to avoid abstraction, mentioned before, and possibly articulate next steps or people to learn from. It may be easier to think of someone that has to achieve a similar task, in fact, rather than someone with a specific competence, for example. Whereas insights are co-constructed during the discussions, as we mentioned before, it is key to support innovators in self-defining their learning journeys, for example, making tangible the collaborative learnings that are generated from the reflective process. However, we also observed that this may not be easy, as not all insights are made explicit, and might then not be fully captured by simply noting down conclusions, as it was done in the activities by participants, which on the contrary risks to oversimplify rich information. It seems therefore important not only to record the main answers and conclusions in the activity, but also gather the richness of information generated in the discussion by, for example, recording and transcribing dialogues and assigning a note taker for the session. Also concerning the definition of learning journeys, we notice how articulating actionable learning steps out of the reflective activity still needed more scaffolding. In our last interventions, we asked innovators what action they could take to learn new capabilities. They at first struggled, giving two generic answers that seemed ineffective to this end. But when thinking about people from their network with those capabilities, they then showed more capable of formulating actions. We think then that a possible approach to facilitate this task is to guide participants to think about contacts in their network, or as already pointed out in literature, identifying a personal learning network to provide a path to develop their learning journey even after the reflection activity. Ultimately, even when recognizing the value of reflection, it still seems challenging for initiatives to introduce it systematically in their everyday practice. Insights from this study have shown the need of shortening a reflective session to fit within the time constraints of the design team workflow, or offer a modular version of such an activity that can adapt to the timely needs and wants of the innovators. In conclusion, in this study we investigated how a reflective process could be structured to enable urban innovators to autonomously develop their learning trajectories and contribute to a better city. Throughout our approach, we could identify building blocks for a reflective process that showed valuable for urban innovators to unveil their learning needs, but not necessarily in translating them into actionable steps to self-sustain their learning journeys. Therefore, we think that further research is needed in that direction to fully support urban innovators in learning from and with cities and ultimately exploit them as learning ecosystems.
Okay, thank you. Um, the- I will open the discussion for the audience. If anyone has any question for Alberto. Yes, Carlo.
Maybe I can ask a question. Do you observe any difference, I mean, between the contest of urban innovator and other design contests with respect to the outcomes that you obtained?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, definitely the complexity of the projects themselves has an impact in the process. And for the sake of this study, we ended up uh, limiting, so to say, the process to one task only. So that probably brought it closer to more, let's say, conventional design project. But on the other hand, I believe that when it would come to implementing this, so as the last point, it was pointed out that they should be indeed further studied. Probably there is the need of making this more modular to encompass and welcome all the other multitasking, let's say, elements that those projects need to embed. Because, as said in the beginning, it really is a multi-level process, so that at the same time you have to deal with multiple actors and find multiple strategies to go along in your project. And these are also way longer projects than usual, let's say, design projects. So in that sense, it is more extended in complexity, but it may not have shown fully in the results. So I see the point of your question.